We'll call to order the meeting of April 2nd, 2018. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Jay?
Here.
Kurt?
Here.
Mark?
Mark joined Nancy on the phone?
He is not today.
So he is excused.
Thank you. Eric?
Eric is excused. He's traveling.
Jeff?
Here.
Brandy? Here. Nancy?
Yes.
Thank you.
With that, let us rise for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With that, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of February 2nd and February 5th, 2018. So move.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. At this point, I would either move to approve the meeting agenda or amend it.
I would
Member
like
Strand.
to amend it to move item 15B to the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
Okay. Any discussion on that? Okay. Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll on that?
Brandy? Yes. Jay?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Eric? Oh, sorry, Kurt?
Nope. So, okay, that amendment
So it passes.
passes 5-1 with member Wohlhuter, 4-1, sorry, member Wohlhuter against. Any other amendments to the agenda? Member Morrell.
I would like to make a motion to amend our agenda and add the supplemental budget request for the pump station 7.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Jeff?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Any other amendments to today's agenda? All right, in that case then, do we need another motion to approve it as amended?
Sure.
So I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The meeting agenda is approved. There are no public hearings today, which brings us over to bid awards. That would be Utility Director Hagerman recommends award of the Upper Dam Spillway Rehabilitation Project to Reed Brothers Logging Construction for an amount not to exceed $219,702. I would entertain a motion to approve that.
So move.
Second. Motion's been made by member Strand, seconded by member Wohlhuter. Any discussion? Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could we get just a brief explanation from Carl? I know we have it written down here for us, but for the folks at home, just a brief description about the work that's going to be done.
Absolutely. Carl?
Sure. Mr. Mayor and Assembly. Yes, this work is basically would be considered a housekeeping maintenance item. The dam's been in place since the 50s. Lots of water has passed over the concrete decades following to now. So a lot of erosion has happened on the concrete spillway, and the state's dam safety program has us inspecting that dam every 3 years, and it's an issue for them that we take care of the erosion and repair the dam. That's what this project is all about. We're going to scarify the surface of the spillway to get down to some solid concrete, dowel in some rebar, reform, and pour a new spillway surface so that the dam's repaired and will operate as it should for the foreseeable future.
Yep. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, will the clerk call the roll, please?
Jay?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Thank you.
And it passes unanimously. That brings us on to visitors' views related to the agenda. Now would obviously be the time for that.
It is in a way and it isn't in a way, so I don't know which way.
In the other direction, you can, sure,
Okay.
go for it.
And I'll wait till I get there.
And just a brief reminder, testimony to be limited to 5 minutes and civil and respectful. Please state your name and who you represent.
I will be. My name is Becky Knight, and I represent myself today. I'm here to not only inform you, but also ask for action. On November 6th, I addressed the Assembly about the same topic I'm here today for. Specifically, it concerns the fully supportable and formal findings of the high-level June 2016 Forest Service Washington Office Activity Review regarding 2 large timber sales. The 39 million board-foot Tonka Mountain timber sale, approved in 2012 and located directly across from these chambers on Kupernoff Island, and the 150 million board-foot Big Thorn timber sale, or Big Thorn project as it's called, located on Prince of Wales Island and approved in 2013. The Big Thorn sale was the nation's largest timber sale at the time, as well as the largest in southeast Alaska in about 2 decades. I emphasize that these were internal findings of the Forest Service Washington office. However, had it not been for the Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility, or PEER, these findings would never have come to light. My point is, don't kill the messenger, but hear the message. It is vitally important. In short, the activities review's formal findings focused on serious agency failures regarding sale administration, timber cruising, appraisals, and monitoring of these 2 timber sales, which resulted in, quote, staggering monetary losses that hurt local communities, taxpayers, and our national forest. They have been financial as well as ecological debacles. Whether these failures were due to fraud, maladministration, misfeasance, and possible cover-up, the Borough is owed a lot of money and should take action to recover those funds due. If the environmental impacts are of no concern to you, the monetary losses should be. Not only did PEER take notice, but Energy and Environment, E&E for short, did. They are a well-respected national news media outlet that thought this story was significant enough to cover in an in-depth piece. As PEER described, and this is a quote, in what is merely the tip of an iceberg, an apparent collusion in a 2016 Forest Service Washington Office Activity Review and associated documentation, examined these 2 large timber sales and found, and I'm partially paraphrasing here, staggering monetary losses that amounted to almost $4 million. These figures are likely significant underestimates. Despite being stewardship sales to improve forest health, the agency allowed companies to ignore prescriptions that were contracted for by, quote, favoring removal of the large diameter more valuable species like western red cedar and spruce, while significantly undercutting the far less valuable hemlock. The required law enforcement timber theft prevention inspections appeared to have been bypassed. On the environmental front, these were stewardship sales using harvest to reach prescribed tree species cut criteria, but the review pointed out that they lacked any defined process for independently confirming whether the criteria was being met. On the financial front, since a portion of all Tonga's timber sale proceeds go to local communities and schools, and the topic of today's secure rural schools distribution, depressed sales values costs both U.S. taxpayers and Alaska school kids. The review concluded by calling for independent review to inform solutions and prevent similar issues in future timber and stewardship contracts. For the record, that recommendation has gone nowhere, and it is that dropped ball that PEER picked up by writing a letter to the Agriculture's Office of Inspector General to conduct a forensic audit to determine the true extent of losses to the taxpayer from the lapses cited in these internal reviews. They also asked the IG to determine if there is any mechanism for recovering funds rightfully owed to both the U.S. Forest Service and communities and schools under the Secure Rural Schools and National Forest receipts. My request to you today is that you do the same in the form of a resolution and a follow-up letter. Finally, I would be remiss remiss if I failed to mention that under the Central Tongass landscape level analysis, and according to the Ranger District silviculturist during the recent open house, the agency timber target, that's air quotes, is 150 million board feet, as large as the Big Thorn project. I asked the forest supervisor who was in attendance how the agency could ensure that the activity review's findings have been remedied for application to the Central Tongass assessment, since there's been absolutely no evidence that they have been addressed. That topic could be no more pertinent to the assessment, and in fact is probably the most compelling one. Mr. Stewart was reluctant to answer that question, responding that the issue is better discussed in private, air quote again, and when pressed by another member of the public, he downplayed the review's findings by asserting that it identified a couple of issues. And that the
30-second warning for Ms. Knight.
And the skill set of the agency needed improvement. In fact, the review detailed 18 formal findings, not just issues. And it was not the skill set that was lacking, since the laws, regulations, and handbook guidance for timber sale projects have been in effect for years. When I commented that funding should be returned to the communities, Mr. Stewart responded, and again, I'm quoting, "They don't exist. That's where the problem in this is." I would say they do exist, and it's the agency's role that does not. And I have it's kind of a layman's explanation, copies of the E&E news article that I thought I'd hand out to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Knight. As she's passing those out, does anyone else have visitors' views related to the agenda? Go ahead, Mr. Beebe. Debbie for him.
Thank you.
And as always, your name and who you represent.
Hi, my name is David Beebe. I'm representing myself and all members of the taxpaying public concerned about the state fiscal crisis and the federal deficit as it relates to the funding of schools and roads of the Petersburg Borough. It's highly likely that most Assembly members have been unaware of the details of the leaked agency documents of the Forest Service Washington office review or the findings of fact relating to the Petersburg Ranger District in its maladministration of the Tonka timber sale. I'll read just one portion of the findings of that report. I quote, "The cost of not inspecting and not following the contract and the NEPA prescriptions was close to $2 million. That's $2 million, which would have gone to the Petersburg School District and Borough roads through secure rural schools funding while we are in the midst of a state fiscal crisis. I would now like to provide for the Assembly a news report of December 2017 detailing an identical circumstance on the Francis Marion National Forest in South Carolina. What is most striking about this report is the pattern of maladministration and failure of the agency to investigate and hold accountable the perpetrators, which allowed what appears to be large-scale timber theft occurring to the detriment of local communities. Well, I had this all loaded up. And now it is not playing. So I will paraphrase what what I've been defeated from playing, and I'm not quite sure why this is the case. It might be yeah, it was all set to go.
If you wouldn't mind paraphrasing it for us, maybe that'd be appreciated.
Yep. Well, basically, it's that a News 2 investigation uncovers government employees falsified reports and failed to follow through on inspections, leading to tons of trees being cut down and removed from the Francis Marion National Forest. The theft of these trees represented untold amount of money lost by the government. You've heard the saying, money doesn't grow on trees, but in South Carolina, trees are big business. When trees in the Francis Marion National Forest, a publicly owned land maintained by the Department of Agriculture and Forest Service, are harvested, the money is used for forest improvements, along with road maintenance, and returns to Berkeley and Charleston counties. Earlier this year, News 2 received a tip of the program of logging trees was mismanaged, and our government was missing out on cash from contracts to harvest the trees. Through a records request to the Forest Service, we learned problems were first noticed by employees in 2008. An agency audit identified problems in 2012. It would be 2013 before a formal internal review spotted falsified reports of the logging program, missing inspections of contractor logging activities, and an overall hands-off approach by management. Once the internal investigation began, investigators noted documents started disappearing. Ultimately, the investigation found the contracts between the Forest Service and the loggers weren't being enforced, and hundreds of trees were being harvested without being paid for. And the report shows that the staff involved in the timber program supposedly were all replaced. The district ranger then committed to implementing a new forest plan. Investigators found that there wasn't enough evidence to support criminal charges because, of course, there were destruction of public records.
And a 30-second warning for you, Mr. Beebe.
But the Forest Service spokesman told the News 2 reporters that okay, well, I'll just get in conclusion. I'm requesting the Assembly draft a resolution requesting sufficient funding to allow for an independent investigation by the Inspector General to review what happened on the Petersburg Ranger District and Thorn Bay Ranger District. Finally, I'd like to hear from the mayor if this matter of maladministration was discussed in the recent Washington, D.C. trip lobbying for secure rural schools funding. My concern is the Assembly might think that this recent infusion of money would suggest that the fix is in, but unfortunately, this is merely treating just a symptom of the larger agency problem. That cannot be fixed until an independent investigation occurs and the agency and the individual perpetrators are held accountable. Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Beebe. Are there any other views, visitors' views related to the agenda? Yeah, we kind of mixed and matched, so any visitors' views unrelated to the agenda today? Okay, seeing none. That brings us on to board, commission, and committee reports. Seeing none, that brings us on to the consent agenda, where we have 2 items. Let us start with the first one. 1832-2008, so it'll be the 2018-2019 liquor license renewal for Petersburg Moose Lodge, number 1092. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made by Member Strand and seconded by Member Morrall. Clerk Thompson, apologies for the question. Do we do a discussion phase in consent agenda or no?
The thing about the consent agenda is that actually all items on it can be approved all at once if you choose. You can take them separately if you choose. You can discuss them or not. But the consent agenda is to make things easy. So you can just vote on everything on the consent agenda all at once if you choose to.
Well, we already lined it up with them one at a time today since I already began that way.
That's fine.
Perhaps
Yes.
I should have asked the question beforehand.
It's no big deal. But it does not need to be discussion unless someone wants discussion.
I'll give an opportunity for discussion. Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Jay?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Jeff?
Mr. Mayor, just a point of clarification. Are we voting on both items?
No, one at a time.
We're voting on the Moose Lodge.
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
And the motion passes unanimously. That would bring the second item on the consent agenda would be the completed standard marijuana cultivation facility application notification for Seaweed Farms. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Strand and seconded by Member Morrell. Any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Jay?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Kurt?
Nope.
Nancy?
Yes.
And the motion passes 4-1 with Member Wolhooter declining. Bringing us on to P, hang on. Pardon me, as I'm scrolling up here. Report of other officers, which brings us to Trey Atkinson, CEO of Southeast Alaska Power Agency, will be providing us an update on SEPA today. Floor is yours, sir.
Thank you kindly.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I apologize. I guess the overhead is on the fritz today, so you guys should all have a handout of my presentation. The SEPA board has requested that I visit the communities a little bit more often, 4 times a year, and so you'll get to see me about quarterly. I usually try to time those after our board meetings and somewhere in there, so however they fit best. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I know you guys have a lot of other things going on. I just wanted to give you a quick update essentially on what we're doing, some larger projects going on, and some of the other things that are going on behind the scenes with SEPA. For those of you that may not be familiar with SEPA, the Southeast Alaska Power Agency is your wholesale power provider. We own Swan Lake and Tyee Lake hydroelectric projects, 175 miles of transmission line that interconnects Ketchikan, Petersburg, and Wrangell, and the 2 power facilities. So working through my slide presentation, just a couple of pictures of some slides. The first picture there is of the Swan Lake runner renewal. Runners have been operational since the plants were brought online back in the early 80s. It's not uncommon for runners to have some cavitation that leaves some pitting and eventual degradation of the runner. This one's on the low pressure side of the runner. If you go to the next slide, you'll see a close-up of the results of that cavitation. And it's our intent to get in there early this year during our maintenance cycle and do some weld repairs and then some blending to restore the runners. If you let it go too long, they can eventually you'll start losing some mass to that to the runner itself. I've seen degradation where big chunks of steel that big have come off before. So it's good to be proactive on these things. Next item is the Swan Lake Bulkhead Renewal Project. This bulkhead was installed at the beginning of the Swan Lake project when it was originally constructed, and it's degraded over time. The tiebacks for the bulkhead have since eroded off underground, and so we're going to restore this back to close to original condition. Sheet pile will remain, but much of the other apparatus will be improved. Also at Swan Lake, that facility has 3 houses for employees. It was originally designed and operated with 3 employees. That was changed to 4 employees here a few years back. And this year we'll be taking one of the houses, which is pictured. We'll be removing that and adding a duplex there that will provide additional housing for the additional employee. Next item, on Swan Lake, we've improved some security with some additional camera upgrades. The camera installation up at the dam portion of it, it actually will also allow us to view the new spillway gate and the flashboard array up there for debris and things of that nature. Swan Lake, unlike Tyee Lake, does get a number of visitors throughout the year. It's a little bit more accessible. We've also helped support Sarah in a fish release program there, so we anticipate that we'll have quite a bit more activity there when the kings start flowing in there. So we have cameras both at the dock facility and up at the dam, which you can walk up the road to the dam. And it's also part of our safety and security plan with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We're also doing an upgrade on the Swan Lake Governors. The old governors we had were under a proprietary software, and parts are no longer supported, so we'll be installing an off-the-shelf brand. And one other item is the Swan Lake Control Room touchscreen upgrades. As you can see in the picture, there's it's the old control room, analog gauges, that type of a facility, and now it'll be digitized. Several of the gauges in there, the accuracy isn't what we'd like to see, and this new digital system will give the operators better feedback for station control. Moving on to the Tyee Marine Access, those folks that have gone up to the Tyee facility and may be familiar with it, we've got some silting problems that impede access to our marine dock. And we worked with the Corps of Engineers and had hoped we were going to be able to partner and hopefully share some of the costs, but they've since backed out of that project because it doesn't meet some of their criteria. But what the current plan is, and if I had it up on the screen here, I'd point out, but in the back of your picture there, you can see a pond there, and you perhaps hopefully can see a small dock back there. And the problem is we can't get barges in and out of here in the event that we had to bring something heavy in, unless it's a very low tide. And the one that concerns me more than anything is if we had to do a medical emergency evacuation and you couldn't fly in there. Tyee does have a strip, but inclement weather perhaps could prevent that, and we can't get out the tidewater to transfer a patient potentially. So one thing we're looking at on this particular project is a road out to a deeper water area, and then we'd move the dock out there. Would be in the tidewater. The Corps thinks that that's a good solution as well. So we're in the very preliminary portion of that, and that'll take some permitting and some engineering to do that. Segueing on to a little legislative and regulatory portion. As many of you know, I'm pretty active in that arena. We have several important items that we're working on. We did have a couple of wins this year. FERC land use fees. They proposed a 71% increase here a couple of years ago, and we partnered with several other hydro project owners in the state of Alaska and fought that on the federal level, and actually got FERC to roll that back. And it took it from a 71% increase back to about a 25% increase, and it's a kind of a complicated process how they their formula for determining the cost of those fees. It's based on an agriculture land value assessment. Up on the Kenai, they had a few large parcels that got subdivided, raised land values, and then it skewed the whole thing for the state. Anyway, so they ratcheted that back, and what's that really mean? It means that we'll save about $30,000 a year for as long as we have the project. So that's pretty significant over the life of a project, which is 50 to 100 years more, at least. Also, a really big win this year was hydro license durations. Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, had been migrating to a 30-year default duration for licenses. And I went back and have lobbied several times in D.C. I've spoke at conventions back there, and I'm very active on both the state, regional, and federal level. And through these pressures and we'll say a concerted effort for the whole industry, we've actually got FERC to roll that to 40 years. And what that means is when we go to relicense Tyee and Swan Lake, instead of getting a 30-year license, will now get a 40-year license, hopefully, which is huge because relicensing is several $1 million in about a 7-year process. So you can imagine you just get done with one process, you're almost starting the next process to go again. So 2 big wins this year. Another item that I've been working on, I also went back and testified in D.C. With regard to a Swan Lake boundary issue. And they essentially missed about 26 acres during the original land conveyance of those properties up there. What that means in layman's terms is we now have a piece of federal property in the middle of our project. All the rest of the lands were conveyed to the state under the regulatory process. So I'm trying to get that corrected, and I've been able to, with the help of our delegation in Washington, it's now passed the House, and it's made it all the way through committee on the Senate side, so we just need to get it to the vote on the Senate. So working on that. That's a big thing. It probably saves us $1 million during relicensing, which is going to come up here pretty shortly. We're also working on some access for line clearing, which is important for the northern section of our line. There were, established trails along the Tyee transmission line, and have been used for many years. And we were informed we can't use our Argo on those to transport people to go do line clearing. So 3.5 years later, $400,000. We're close to getting that over the finish line. Hope to have that done soon. And I'm also working on the Swan-Tyee Intertie final as-builts and for a long-term right-of-way special use permit. 3 acronyms and 1 bullet point. Moving along, just a couple of quick thoughts on Swan Lake Reservoir expansion and the benefits. So this first year, we only made it up on the flashboards about 6.5, 7 feet. And what that resulted in is another $250,000 of revenue to SEPA, and it offset about $1.1 million in diesel generation to Ketchikan. So that's beneficial both to north and south in the entire system. We can use those monies to do improvements such as the road out at Tyee and things like that. Also displaces diesel generation up in Ketchikan. So great first year. We actually expect that to be higher in subsequent years, and looking forward to continuing that successful project. So every talk I always like to throw in a little bit about reservoirs. Everybody always asks, where are we at on water? And we're short. Swan Lake Reservoir is, we've been drafting that down. I've got a graph in there for your viewing pleasure. And you can see in 2018 it dipped pretty straight and continuous, and then as you see that comes up, that's when Ketchikan started their diesel burn campaign, because the water was running low. We prefer to draft it a little bit further. The dotted line on that particular graph is the guide curve that we establish every year during our ops meeting, typically at the end of the year. And moving on to Tyee, you can see how we're doing there. We're drafting just right in line, a little bit above the guide curve, and we're real happy with utilization of that resource this year as well. So I just want to take a minute and talk about risk management and what I'm doing with the organization to minimize our risk, and I'm very proactive in this area. The replacement cost of SEPA assets is probably in excess of close to about $500 million. And there's a few areas of our highest risk, namely earthquake has been one of the largest ones, and also submarine cable replacements, which I know you guys are very interested in because submarine cables supply power here. So let's talk about that just a little bit. In our area of insurance, SEPA, we spend about $500,000 a year on insurance. And this last go-around, I went out and competitively bid our insurance program, and there was a new market out there. The markets in commercial insurance are very complex, and it takes a while to really figure them out and how to maximize that. Through this effort, we partnered up with a new program that was out in the insurance arena, and I just put a couple of highlights in here, but in short, almost every one of our property coverages, we had reduced deductibles, and which is really big. The big one, though, is we were actually able to extend coverage to our submarine cables to up to $5 million for a failure. That's pretty huge, and we've never been able to do that in the past. And if it fails, it's not if, it's when. I mean, they will fail eventually. So I think that was a huge benefit to the northern communities here, and look forward to having that additional coverage. It really mitigates one of our highest risk factors. Just a couple of examples of deductibles. In our transformers, we got our deductible lowered from $250,000 to $100,000. Minimum earthquake deductible was reduced from $500,000 to $100,000. And valuation of our transformers, which basically all of our transformers are over 25 years old because our projects were built about 30 plus years ago. And we were actually to get full replacement cost for those transformers, which very few people do that anymore. So massive improvements on our insurance, and I'm just really happy. We're the only entity in Alaska that I know that's been able to insure their subcables. And one final note on all that is that it was at no additional cost. Other things we're doing proactively in-house, we've started our own relay test program. It just so happens that my new electrical engineer worked for Schweitzer Relay. And so we've got a whole test bed in our office, and he's setting up programs so we can go test all of our own relays. For folks that aren't familiar with relays and what they do, simply put, it's similar to a breaker in your breaker panel. If you have a fault, then it'll protect your system. Ours are obviously a lot more complex like that. We have distance relays when we can detect a fault, how far that is down the line, over voltage, under voltage, current, and all those other things. But in short, they're all electronic now. And this device allows you to go out and actually test them while the plant's running. And so I'm really excited about that new program. And one other thing, knowing and realizing that our submarine cables are one of our higher risk areas, our other high-risk area also is the Tyee Tunnel, which during the original construction, they dewatered it and actually had some rocks fall off the top and had a little bit of a collapse there. So we've reviewed the dewatering process, and the tunnel has not been dewatered since then. And it's always been taken the stance it was too high a risk. And in just in quick terms, when you pressurize this tunnel with several hundred feet ahead, that pressure goes up into the rock. And if you drain the tunnel real quick, that pressure wants to release and it pops the rock off. And so we've got two underwater remote ROV inspections scheduled, and we're right in the RFP process right now. We should be reviewing those in the next week or so. And so just a couple of pictures there. That's kind of what one of these ROVs looks like. Picture of a cable. Our cables are laid on top of the seabed. But I do have some concerns. We have one crossing that's over 1,200 feet deep and has over 60 suspensions. And what a suspension is, if you can view, essentially the valley where it goes across, you'll have all these little rock outcroppings where the cable will actually hang off those sharp points there. And I'm concerned that you'll have some scouring with tides and stuff over time on those sharp points. So we're going to try to get down there with an ROV and investigate and see if we can identify these areas before they fail. And just so you guys know, we do have 4 cables at each one of our crossings. We have 14 miles of crossings times 4, and so we have 1 spare at each crossing as well. So that's just a little flavor. I'll kind of mix it up a little bit over the quarters and address different things. And if you guys have interest in particular areas, I'm always happy to try to answer your questions. And certainly happy to answer. You got any right now?
We got something for you, Trey. Have you guys thought about a hovercraft instead of building a road or trying to figure out some of the sort of mode of transportation out to deep water? Have you looked at that?
I think it's been discussed in the past, and I know that I think there was a hovercraft working up around that area at one time. They got in some issues, but it doesn't solve our ability to move barges in and out, though. So say we had a generator failure, it's too heavy to fly in a helicopter, so we might have to wait a month or a couple of months to actually get it tied that's the right size that we could get it in and deliver it.
So this picture that we have of this tide flats, is that a minus tide or is that a typical low tide? Is that 0-0?
I don't recall when that specific one was taken, but there's like no passage most of the time for a barge. Yeah, it's I want to say it's got to be like a 22-foot or something like that in order to get it. Yeah, it's...
And a southeast.
Yeah, exactly. Give you a little surge to get in.
Right.
Any other questions for Trey? Thank you so much for your time today, sir. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. That brings us to the mayor's report. The borough is seeking letters of interest from qualified borough residents to serve our community by filling one of the vacant seats listed here. Harbors and Ports Advisory Board is looking for 1 seat. Public Safety Advisory Board, 1 seat also. Appointment to either seat will be in effect until the October 2018 municipal election. In addition, the Historic Preservation Commission has 2 vacant seats, one for an Assembly member representative with a term ending 12/31/19, and one for an archaeologist or at-large member with a term ending 12/31/20. Letters of interest may be submitted to the Borough Clerk via mail to P.O. Box 329, Petersburg, Alaska 99833, or via email to dthompson@petersburgak.gov, or by delivering to the clerk's office at 12 South Nordic Drive. The Board of Equalization. As a reminder, the Board of Equalization meeting, if necessary, is scheduled for Monday, April 9th, 2018 at 6 p.m. A quorum is required. And with that, pass it to you, Mr. Manager, for the manager's report.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Our emergency sirens installers were in Petersburg on March 15th. We now have 3, which is 2 additional sirens fully functional, thanks to the Power and Light line crew for installing the poles at the ball field and Hungerford Hill, which are 2 new ones. The local emergency planning committee and LeMay Engineering held an open meeting on March 1st regarding the hazard mitigation plan rewrite. It's now in federal review. We hope to have the Borough Assembly to the Assembly in early May for adoption. The Fire Department sponsored survival skills for first responders training on March 3rd. There were 21 people in attendance representing Fire, EMS, Search and Rescue, Alaska State Troopers, and the Office of Children's Services. ProCom has installed the grant-purchased interoperable radios into the fire apparatus and ambulances, so they are now able to communicate with any other agencies that happen to come to town. We did have our Fireman 1 training is continuing to be ongoing. Last count, we had only 4 students. I don't know what that number is right now. Thank you to Petersburg Fisheries, to you, and Hammer and Recon for the community brunch to benefit the fire department. We did have, in the Planning Commission, considered some 30 amendments to the final review of the new development code. That was completed on March 6th. All of the amendments and the full text of the code are available on the Borough website. Public comments can be submitted for consideration by the Assembly, and the Borough Assembly will consider the proposed new code on April 16th, May 7th, and May 21st. Design of the Scow Bay Pump Station number 1 has restarted. The project was held up by some property ownership and construction easement concerns, but the design will focus on keeping the bulk of the construction within the state right-of-way instead of encroaching on private property. The 350 generator project is complete. Technicians from Pacific Power came to town on March 5th and replaced the generating end of the unit to correct the slop in the coupling and replaced the cracked oil pan. Dave Buss with EPS came in on the 7th and completed all the testing and commissioning. The unit is online and the power plant and municipal buildings are covered with standby power in the event of an outage. The Blind Slough Hydro Evaluation Project is progressing. McMillan Jacobs, which is the engineering firm that is doing this, has received lots of documents, plans, and photos for review, and we made the first site visit on March 15th. A second visit to perform testing of various components and take a look at the penstock will be scheduled for later in the spring or very early summer. They got up there a little bit too much snow for them to take a look at the penstock, so they're going to come back. New electrician, Jed Warnke, is busy learning his job. He's doing really well. Training is commenced on the operation of the power plant and hydro, as well as performance of inspections, metering, line orders, and general orientation to utility. Again, he's doing very well and is a great addition to the borough. Karina Madrid has been hired to fill an open dispatch slot after the hiring board recommended her for selection. Karina's start date was 3/16/18, so welcome to our team. Thanks to Debbie, Erica Klint-Pater, Ashley Kawashima, Sergeant Holmgreen, and Sergeant Kerr for staffing the hiring board. Their efforts were greatly appreciated. We also appreciate all the other applicants who competed in the process. Sergeant Holmgreen coordinated with the state to provide some needed criminal justice information system training during the week of March 5th. Dispatchers were able to receive training that they were not previously provided. Trainers were also able to assist closing a few gaps that were recently discovered. Special thanks to Paula Davis of the Criminal Justice Information Systems Program's auditor for traveling to Petersburg to provide the training. Staff with access to the police department will be required to submit to a background check and complete a short training on information security. Sergeant Kerr met with emergency planning officials to discuss some school-specific concerns on March 1st. This is part of some of the work we're doing in trying to make our large facilities that have a lot of people in them and having how we handle situations there integrated with some of our emergency planning documents. Down at the pool, we are continuing to look for lifeguards, either water-savvy teens or adults who are interested in taking a lifeguarding class to work for the community center pool. We're seeking year-round and summer workers. If interested, please email or call Chandra Thornburg at cthornburg@petersburgak.gov. Focus has been on some preventative maintenance at Parks and Rec. The HVAC1 system is fixed. However, we are bringing down the installers to run a diagnostic of our system and review operational protocols with our team. Harbor staff continues to work with the Corps of Engineers on the South Harbor feasibility study. They've been in and out of town a couple times and will be back here after some work on their end. We did notice some water damage on the exterior of the harbor office. Staff is working to repair the south side of the building. And we are noticing in the harbor an increase in stall renewals earlier this year, also getting quite a few more inquiries about summer transient mortgage. So good news there. And that's it, unless there's questions for me.
Any questions for the manager? Member Mucci.
Mr. Mayor, can I just get an update on where we are with the police chief hiring process?
I can do that. We ran ads primarily here in Alaska, although we did use a couple of national websites that would let us post it for free. We have roughly 6 or 7 people that have sent us applications. It doesn't close till April 21st. So at this point, we're just waiting for the applicants to get here. At that point, we're going to hope to, take a look at them ourselves internally and potentially use the Public Safety Advisory Board as also another review point. We will then send what we would view as semifinalist, list of written questions to respond to. Once we get those back, we will schedule a kind of a telephone screening interview. If we can do it video conferencing, we'll try to do that, but sometimes that doesn't work so well. And then from that group, we hope to be able to pick finalists to come to town. So it's a tough position to fill. I'm not sure we'll have it filled by the time Kelly leaves, but we'll ask Captain Hamilton to sit in as the acting chief until such time that we get this thing filled. We are using an outside firm to do background checks on the finalists. So there's a little different level of sophistication and knowledge needed to do those kind of background checks on a police candidate. So it's not something we can do internally. So we'll use one that has done this in Alaska here, and they can check with Alaska Police Standards Boards and the FBI background check and that kind of stuff, make sure we get who we want. So that's where it is at the moment. It's kind of a wait and see right now to look at applications coming in. Not a lot. It's a competitive world right now in the police world, so we'll see what happens.
Yep, thank you.
Any other questions for the manager? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Steve. There is no unfinished business today, so that brings us to new business. Ordinance number 18-11. And it provides for the transfer of funds from the electric fund to a capital project fund for the expense of a facility condition assessment for the Blind Slough Hydroelectric Facility approved by the Assembly on January 16, 2018, and to accept Secure Rural Schools funding for the FY 2018 that was not previously budgeted. And also, a question for the clerk, is the amendment included in this from earlier?
Yes, I was going to say what we'll vote on now, since we already amended it earlier, will be as amended.
As amended?
Yes.
So it would be 2018-11 as amended?
Correct, adding the $15,000 for the wastewater department to purchase a new pump.
Yep.
Yes.
I would entertain
2 pumps.
the motion to approve as amended.
So moved. Second.
It has been moved by Member Morrell and seconded by Member Strand. Discussion. Seeing none, Carl, maybe you could just speak to it a little bit for those people listening at home, or Chris, whoever is the appropriate party here.
Thank you for including this emergency purchase of some pumps. This wasn't anticipated, and it just came up, so it's kind of opportunistic for this to be the first reading of the supplemental be happening today. Would have been nice to have this for the packet, but unfortunately the timing just didn't work out that way. It's basically some routine maintenance that we were doing on the pump station that resulted in finding a pump in some pretty bad shape. It was still operating amazingly enough, but it's basically an anchor. We normally rebuild pumps on a normal basis, but there's so many things wrong with this one that we pulled that it's going to be cheaper to replace it. And we're anticipating that the other pump station, or the other pump in the pump station, is going to be similar. So this $15,000 is essentially a placeholder. We don't have a firm price because of the timing on this, but we will have that firm price by the next meeting, and this should be close to this expense.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any further discussion? Okay, will the clerk call the roll?
Sure. Kurt?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Thank you.
And it passes unanimously. Okay, moving down to item number 18-141. That is, PIA is applying for an ANASEDS grant. Did I pronounce that correctly, clerk?
Yes.
Thank you. For funding to write a tribe comprehensive plan, and is seeking assembly support for the application. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved by Member Strand and seconded by Member Walhooter. And for those listening at home too, we wrote a letter of support for them in 2017, if I'm correct, Clerk Thompson?
That is correct.
And they were not awarded that grant?
They were not awarded, yes.
And so they would reapply?
Yes.
Gotcha. Discussion. Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Kurt?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Thank you.
And it passes unanimously. Moving on to communications. Are there any communications members would like to relay? Seeing none. Brings us down to assembly discussion items. First one being recognitions. Any recognitions? Member Strand.
I would like to recognize the quick response this morning from the EMTs when they came here, and they came from work. They came as they had volunteered on the ambulance. There was a flurry of quick response from them, and they need to be commended, as they always do when they respond.
Thank you, Member Strand. Anybody else? All right. That brings us down to item B, 2019 budget work session. Finance Director Tao requests the Assembly set a date and a time to hold the work session on the proposed FY 2019 budget sometime after April 9th. An April meeting calendar is provided for reference. Got it. Would you like to speak to that, Jody?
Sure. So currently the borough manager's working with department heads on their budgets. And once he finalizes that, I'm going to finish completing it and get you a copy. I'm hoping by the end of the week, but it might be the beginning of next week. And then I'm hoping that we can have a budget work session either the week of the 16th or the week of the 23rd, whatever works for the assembly, to talk about it.
Got it. So let's see, following that logic, the 23rd is our evening meeting already scheduled. Is that correct, Clerk Thompson?
Correct. It's a work session.
Oh, no, the 16th is our assembly meeting. I apologize.
Yes, the 16th is the assembly meeting.
Got it. Thank you. All right, what's the will of the assembly here? Member Strand.
The 23rd sounds good to me, unless you would rather we met earlier. Then any time in the week, the previous 18th through the 20th is fine with me.
It's, the 23rd is fine with me. We'll still have that following week, too, if there's follow-up meetings that the assembly might want to have regarding a certain department. So that's fine with me.
Mr. Mayor, may I just...
Yes, please, Mr. Manager. Yep.
Apologize.
No worries.
What we've done in the past, so for the benefit of the assembly and listening public, is Jody prepares a very nice, comprehensive presentation that goes over all of the budgets, kind of calls out certain things that, are guesses at what you might be interested in. She does not go line by line, but we can answer questions to that effect as they come up. So generally takes, what?
Last year we met separately and went over the enterprise funds, which took about an hour, and then we had another meeting for the general fund, which took about an hour. I'm kind of hoping this year just to do it all together and still keep it at about an hour, and then if you really want to get more detailed, then have another meeting after.
So that's why I wanted to bring it up, is I don't know the will of the assembly on what level you want to get into this, and that might make a difference on how you want to schedule the meetings.
Gotcha, thank you. Member Miucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So on the 23rd, we have a work session scheduled at 6 o'clock. Now, is this to kind of sort through the 3 meetings that we had with the public to kind of get the will of the assembly?
That is correct.
Okay. So would we plan on having our budget discussion before that or after that? I'm just trying to see what makes more sense.
You mean that if you have it on the same day, is that what you're asking?
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of stuff to go over.
Seems like a lot.
Yeah. I would rather it not be on the same day. I didn't realize there was a work session on the 23rd.
Yes.
Right.
I know, speaking for myself, it's a lot pouring over the budget, and it takes me some time to digest whatever information I've got before I sit down for that meeting, for that work session. So later in the month is better for myself. I feel like I'll be able to be more prepared with that. But again, whatever everyone wants to do, we will do.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, yes.
So I'm leaving again on Friday, and I'll be diving until I don't know when, but I'm hoping to be back somewhere around the 16th for that meeting, so I mean, maybe it just is maybe it's just sometime during that week of the 16th, or, I mean, I know we're running out of time, but I'm just trying to see what fits.
Oh,
So go ahead.
The first reading of the budget needs to be the first meeting in May, which is May 7th. So maybe the 18th, Wednesday the 18th, or Wednesday the 25th.
All right, since everyone's jumping out of their seats to pick dates and times, the time of day preference anybody has? Daytime, evening? Let's start with that. Member Merle.
I'd prefer either in the later in the afternoon, so like 3 or later.
Got it. We're going to say the same thing, Member Mucci?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Let's try this. Oh, Member Strand, go ahead.
I prefer early, so anytime afternoon, but the earlier the better for me. However, whatever is convenient for the rest of the body will be fine.
How about I'll just pitch a time here, and we'll see if I can get some support for it. I'm going to go a little bit different. I'm going to say Friday the 20th at 3 p.m. You may have an interest in a Friday? No, not so much?
No, I don't, that works for me, but
Works for me.
whatever.
Me too.
Whatever.
Look at that.
So,
Let's try that, and if someone comes up, we'll roll with it. Friday the 20th, 3 p.m. I should ask, though, Director Tao, does that work for you?
Yes. Thanks.
Cool, give it a shot.
Just want to add one more thing.
Please do.
We don't want to we're not trying to tie the hands of the assembly here. So if we have a meeting and we decide you want more detail and you want to meet longer, we can set up another meeting. We've found this approach works pretty well. It outlines everything, gives you an opportunity to ask some questions, and then we start to get a feel for you want more, and then we can schedule that. The first meeting in May is a hard deadline, though.
Yep, first reading that day.
I said carefully. We can do special meetings to approve the budget, to get it done. We don't tend to like doing that, but we've got to do 3 readings and get it in to the state by our charter. So anyway.
Understood.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.